Let's talk about fantasy and lewd behavior in animes like Overlord and How Not to Summon a Demon Lord. Oh Lord. By the way, I'm not like a demon or a devil or anything like that. I'm a fawn, a gentle sprite. This is part 1 of a deep dive on Overlord. But the topic of sensual touch is just too much to pass up. There's a lot of anime, but let's be honest. Also a lot of television shows, commercials, religions, and Fox News that use attractive women to captivate their audience. Use of exciting the audience is not the only feature of these things and does not erode the value of the program overall necessarily, but it does say something about the rest of the content in there. You know, the same thing that sassy Rick Grimes probably says. Fiction is a place for writers and readers to explore the darker impulses of themselves, without it necessarily having to reflect something on their character. This grace extends to fanfiction, the bad BDSM of 50 Shades of Grey, those Snow White books where she is a slave, depictions of lollies, and Game of Thrones. That being said, that does not dismiss criticism of those works or the actions therein. Like Foldable Human says, fiction is a safe place for people to work out their dark emotions.
Without getting too deep into the weeds, I want to acknowledge that fantasy fiction, erotic fiction, playing with ideas and scenarios that blur the lines of consent, or even step right over them, aren't strictly illegitimate as subject matter. Most of our fiction involves scenarios that we would never want to actually experience, whether that be getting caught in a gunfight or trapped at a cabin in the woods with a killer, and the idea that some people find non-consensual sexual scenarios thrilling is maybe not as weird as it's often painted. In a video game, you effectively have the ultimate safe word. You can exit the program at any time and it will stop instantly. It still impacts us, and indeed impacting us is the entire point. This is why critics argue that the subject of fictional non-consent can still be handled more or less ethically, an issue that comes down to framing, something that 50 Shades routinely fails at.
As Anita Sarkeesian says, you can enjoy a piece of media but still be critical of the pernicious and problematic portions of it. You can do several things and keep them all in mind as you watch something. You don't even need to do it while you're watching it. You can just reflect back on it later, which reflecting back on it later is a fantastic part of enjoying media. Of our two esteemed choices here, Overlord's a bit more contemplative of its sexual content. You have this nerd where before the MMO server shut down, he rewrites several of the character bios in his guild's special playhouse. When those bios come to life in the new world, they go as written on the page. So any and all last minute tweaks that happened to the character bios came out when their characters suddenly existed and they had a whole rich history informed by the bios. But the succubus was rewritten to like only ghoul, and thus is coerced. He literally groomed her to be attracted to him and to do what he says. And there is one scene where he takes the advantage to touch her. But this is played off one for experiment to see how real this world is. But it's up for question how much exactly Ainz Al Ghul really thinks about this question for coercion. Like, she doesn't really like him, she only likes him because she was programmed to. He knows that, so he doesn't, as far as we know, push the envelope too far. And this could either be because he's now a weird greater lich thing that doesn't actually have human emotions and desires, or it could be, to keep best girl wars going. That being said, he does ask her before he gropes her, but there's the thing where she won't say no because it's weird. And it's actually one of the deeper things to think about. How Not to Summon a Demon Lord is a upfront fanservice show. Just about every episode has 1 or 2 scenes of fanservice where the girls are groped and displayed for the audience for titillation. And that in itself is not bad. But we can still think about how it is used. Part of it is that it is accidents, the usual shonen trope. The writer made an accident and now the main character's hands are all over everyone. But the other part of it is this weird thing that not just happens in this shows, but a lot of Japanese media where the body takes over and they can't stand it anymore and lose control. And the Overlord's body, autopilot, just, grabs all of the soft squeezy parts it can of the people around him. Just does. Especially when he's tired, falling over them, or drunk. Yeah. It's scary, but it's there to titillate the audience and is not bad in itself, from virtue of it being fiction. But the other aspects of this is that the women are implied to enjoy it. They say no, they protest, they threaten him, but he doesn't stop because he's lost control or because he's asleep or because it was an accident or whatever. And they get angry at him, but it's implied that they like it. Now, Sarah the Elf is a very interesting character in this way because not only after the first couple times does she just start to accept it, but actually actively encourage it and bring it upon herself to do fun things for the main character and the audience. And these scenes are a lot more playful, but also the whole time the main character protests and is not into it himself. Well, he's into it, but he says no and isn't completely comfortable with it, and it just kind of happens. I don't know, it might break something in the format that both parties can't be into something exciting happening. This is a weird thing that Western culture does too, where one person, usually the girl, protests the entire time and has to be coerced into activities. And of course, the purpose of it in a harem show is to keep the motion going, keep the main character from picking a girl or committing to one relationship so he's free to wander on the whole possible harem. Despite what protests are said by the encroaching party, the actions speak louder than words. The Demon Lord is a serial predator who sometimes saves people, and the Overlord is more of an ogler. Now, what is the flip side to all this sassy appeal? What is the craft in making it? As Reddit says, it's okay to be a Redditor with a website, but it's not okay to be a website with a Reddit account. I'm just gonna say this for Reddit and for the topic, I don't agree with it. But it's one way to understand perspectives of the problem and how these characters are put together. The audience can tell when a character is expressing the sassy part of themselves, as opposed to when a nice character design is tacked on with some characteristics so they can serve something in the story. I'm partially here to stand up for that sassy character design, but also trumpet when a attached character can make the overall experience more pleasing and enjoyable.
Oh!
You know what? You're right. It's kind of idiotic now that I think about it, that I'm trying so hard to fit in with a group. That really isn't me. I'm glad we had this chat. I'm really glad I met you. The fire is so pretty. Well, you're sweet. I'm glad I met you. I was worried I wouldn't make too many friends here. I've never done this before. But I suppose this is my last chance to act like a sorority girl. Follow me. Hey, hot stuff. Fancy meeting you here. I think that's a great idea. What did you have in mind?
It is also completely understandable that the dangers in relying so heavily on sassy appeal is one, that you'll scare away the audience that is not into that sassiness, and two, members of your audience that are only there for the sassiness may leave if they find something better. For example, Fox News has the average audience age that is over 50 years old. Yet, every excuse they have, they bring out models and talk about fashion and new bikinis for the season. The 50-year-olds that will wear bikinis are out there, but they're not the majority of the audience. That fashion show is there to be ogled.
What is Fox News? It's just a parade of propaganda, isn't it? It's just a festival of ignorance. What? Why, a million people are dead in Iraq.
All the news is running.
All the news you
can
at Fox News. All right, thanks,
And
guys.
I think, okay.
All right, that's it. All right, we're also talking about Captain Kirk this morning. And hey, because it's Saturday morning, we're having some fun. Greg, you've got the cushiest job in the world.
Yeah, look who just beamed aboard right now. The ladies from the Starship Enterprise. Hello.
Welcome.
Around 10% of the population are blonde, but just about 90% of the female hosts at Fox News are blonde, and they all wear skirts and show their legs. They're there for a reason, and they're there to be ogled by those old people that sit around and watch the news and maybe can't get away from their partners. It's very complicated. Fox News does not have those segments to inform their audience. They're trying to do something else to their audience. That segment's for ogling! Woo! A younger person wouldn't sit around and wait for the news or want to do it in the television in the public space. They might go somewhere else, like the Chive or Reddit. Now, there's a lot of things you can do for an audience to be accessible or even to find a niche part of audience to be served, and niche is what anime is all about. I believe several of the anime people are very surprised when girl animes get through, such as Free. Free did not have a high male population of viewership. Free was about fit, young, pretty boys who posed in transparent liquid where you could see everything, and they had fun together and laughed and danced and were energetic, and several very attractive traits for a certain part of the audience that is not normally served with anime's softcore-ness. Free and Dive and Pillow Boys are all perfectly legitimate shows and serve a need that a lot of media just, isn't doing. But the reason why I singled out single women in the beginning of this is because the assumed default is male. Even if you want to know about girls that like girls, that they do not necessarily enjoy viewing women the same way that men enjoy viewing women. They have a different drive for these sort of things. And it's a little bit different, but the shame is that when something is made for the female gaze or for the appeal to how women enjoy their softcore presented to them, as Foldable Human puts it, it's unfortunate that women's attraction is both setup and punchline and taken as a joke. And that is true. Why you gotta laugh at people for being like you, weirdo? And Japan is a different culture and exports a lot of things that aren't necessarily picked up by us. They had their trans, gender-flipping panic back in the 90s, and it is very much so more common to have androgynous boys be popular, that take attractive features from men and women and combine them in themselves. If you don't believe me, you can go back and check out forum threads about Final Fantasy XII, because geez, they hated that kid. In this vein, my partner actually tried to read a noir book, and she wanted to get back into the Dresden Files because she had read some when they were younger. But she quit it because the majority of the character descriptions when a woman came into the story was about her chest. And I don't blame her. That's awful. And that's something that the author needs to consider, and that every author needs to consider when they make a work or when they shoot a film, is how much of their fantasies are they playing into when they write this? And there's a place for softcore, but it doesn't play very well, and you should expect to take that hit when you play in that much to your fantasies. If the author of the Dresden Files came out and said, that was not my intent, I want women to read my book, that is little more than lip service to what he actually wrote on the page. The action of producing that far outweighs the action of what is actually in the book and the effects thereof. Actions speak louder than words. Or words in the page speak louder than lip service? Intent is not unimportant, but is not nearly as important as the action. We are crossing the line in several instances in society in how we behave, in what we throw our words behind. Where we're going to take this a bit further, words speak louder than intent, especially when so much of our media and so much of our interaction is purely words with a weird ethereal connection to the actions they're implying. And that is what we're going to talk about next week as we continue our dive into Overlord in what is technically part 1. It's a prequel. It's a prequel next time. Whatever. Comment, like, subscribe, Patreon. If we shadows have offended, think but this and all is mended, that you have yet slumbered here and all these visions did appear.